Hello everyone. Welcome to another project in our Saturday Anything Goes series. I put out a request last week for projects that y'all might like to see, and you were kind enough to let me have some ideas, and one of those was for a treat holder, and I've done several treat holders over the past couple of weeks, but I thought we'd do something a little bit different, and that is this teacup. Now this is the small one, and in today's project we're actually going to do the large one because the person who requested it said they wanted to be able to put chocolates such as Lindt chocolates in there, and so I thought a larger one would really work out well for this project. We're going to be using the Time for Tea stamp set as well as the Tea Time specialty designer series paper, which is absolutely beautiful. It doesn't take a lot of product and it goes together pretty quickly. So let's get started. I'll pull these things out of the way. We're going to be using our scoring board and our envelope punch board. The reason that we use the envelope punch board is because we can get this, I don't know if it shows up well on the camera, but it's a nice little sort of rounded or tapered in bottom that lends itself well to the shape of an actual teacup. And we'll also use a pearlized doily for the very bottom. So let me bring in the supplies that we're going to use. And the first is you'll need a sheet of cardstock. In this case, I'm using Rich Razzleberry that measures 9.5 by 7 3/4. And it's this that we're going to do all of our stamping on. Our scoring on. So let me bring in my scoreboard here. And with the 9.5 inch at the top, you're going to make the following score marks. Your first one is going to be at 1.5 inches all the way down, and then at 3 inches, 4.5 inches. Oops, I don't think I got that in there right. Let me try that again. 4.5 inches, 6 inches, 7.5 inches, and 9 inches. Okay, then we're going to turn it 90 degrees, which will put your 7 3/4 inch at the top, and you're going to make 2 score marks here. The first will be at 1.5, and the second will be at 5 1/4. And that's all our scoring. So I'll go ahead and put our scoreboard away. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold and burnish just like you normally would. And I like to do this so that it makes it much easier for me to see those score lines. And that's going to come in handy in just a moment when we use our envelope punch board. We'll need to be able to see those score lines. And with our dark cardstock, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to pick up if you don't do your folding and burnishing first. Almost done. One more. All right. So this is what we have so far. And don't worry about that extra little score line I've got there where it jumped the track, because we're going to be putting some DSP on here. But let me bring in an envelope punch board here. And you want the 1.5 inch side that you scored there, because this is where we're going to put in our little divots, if you will, or take out cardstock to be able to fold this up nicely. And what you want to do, we're not going to follow either your normal guide or even this here, I want the score line right in the center. So let me kind of lift this up if I can. And my score line is right in the center there. And then go ahead and punch it out. And then all you have to do is just keep folding this, putting it in there, making sure you're lining up that center mark and punching it out. And each time that I'm punching out, I'm then opening this back up and folding at that score line. So you can see why I folded and burnished it first. Makes it a lot easier. Get some of that paper out from underneath because it does tend to make it a little bit harder to punch the further down you go. And we're going to do that on every one of those lines. I got to put a little more pressure on this one. Stand up for it. And if you ever find it's not punching all the way through, sometimes you just got to put some extra weight on it. Okay, just a couple more and we'll be done. So lining it up in the center and one more and we'll be done. There we go. And that's all we're going to use our envelope punch board for. So as you can see, I've got very little waste so far. All right. Now what we want to do, when we close this up, we're going to need a flap. And here's how you're going to cut it. First of all, we don't need this piece right here. So we're going to cut off that rectangle. So we'll just cut that out. And then we also won't need this piece here. So I'm going to cut that out as well, just by cutting up to the score line and then trimming that out. Get rid of that score line. There we go. So far, that's what we have. And you would think, okay, we've got our flap here, but let me show you something. This is going to fold down, and then what you're going to do is all of these become little sections, and you're going to tuck this flap right in there. But when we do that, let me just get it in there so I can see if I can get you a good angle where you can see it. We're going to end up with extra flap material that we don't need. Kind of hard to see. Don't know if I can show that to you, but I can show you here. If I were to fold this in, you can see that I've got all this excess from where the fold over is down, and we want to take that off. So I just folded over. That was where our 5.5 inch score line was. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to angle this out and cut away that excess. So now when I do the flap, it's not going to have any excess bulk inside that we don't want. And then I'm also going to angle this part here. So our flap will close nice and easily. And I didn't get all of my score mark out there, so let me just trim that up a little bit better. And that's what makes your box fold flat. So this is what we end up with. All right, so again, to know how much of that flap I needed to take off, I just folded that over, and that gave me a guide. All right. Now let's go ahead and put this together. Oh, one more thing I have to do is these bottom score marks here, we need to go ahead and cut up because we're going to fold those under to close up our teacup. And this also makes a base for it to sit on. So all I'm going to do is just cut up all of these. Got one more here, just like that. And you can see that's what we've got. So now I'll be able to fold it up like this. A little bulky right now, but once I get some tear and tape in there. But so we'll end up with that, and that's our basic shape. And then these we will fold in like that, and that's what's going to form and close our bottom. Okay, so let's get out our tear and tape. You could use liquid glue for this if you need that extra wiggle room, but with this I was pretty confident that I could get everything lined up easily. And at your, not the bottom part where you've cut up all your flaps, but here at the top, remember we're going to fold this over. So I do want to take and put a strip all the way down, and I'm not going to put it at the very top. I'm going to come down just about 1/4 of an inch or so, all the way to the end. And then, so our top fold will lay flat, I'm going to use one other strip of tear and tape. So remember, this is going to fold like this. So I'm going to put another strip of tear and tape right along this edge. And that way I've got seal at both the top and the bottom. You could run it on the inside if you wanted to as well. Doesn't really make a difference. And this one I can put kind of close to that score line, because that's what's going to help keep it nice and flat at the top. Just be sure you don't go over that score line. And there we have it. We also need one more piece, and that's going to go on our flap, but it goes on the outside of the flap, since that's what's going to be sticking inside the box, or the teacup, I should say. Hi, Amy. Thank you for joining. All right. Just going to give this a good burnish. Make sure that it is stuck firmly to the paper. And the other thing I'm going to do on, where's my other little teacup? On this one, I didn't put my DSP on there until after I had folded it all up, and it worked just fine. But you also can put it on now. Remember, this flap's going to go over. So my DSP is going to be in these 6 sections. And let me show you what we're going to be using. As I mentioned, I've got that Tea Time DSP, and let me just show it to you real quick. If you haven't seen it yet, oh my gosh, so, so pretty. So this is the pattern I chose for today's project, just because it's got that rich raspberry in it, and I thought it would look really nice. But look at all the different patterns. You could really go to town with this, and the back sides are just as pretty. So if you haven't gotten it yet, I highly recommend that you get some. And it's a lighter weight, so it works really well for projects where you have like folded over cardstock. You don't necessarily want a lot of extra bulk when you've done that, when you're decorating, so the thinner paper can work out well. Now I went ahead and I numbered mine in the back just so I would make sure that I put them in the right sections, and I'll show you why here. These are upside down. I cut it out of a 3-inch strip. Is that right? Yeah, 3-inch by 12-inch, and then I cut 1 1/4 sections out of that 3-inch. And this is, when you do that, as long as you put the pieces down in the same order they were originally, you've got your pattern. And you'll see what I mean in just a minute. So if I get all these down, you can see that I still have my pattern running all the way across the bottom there. And that came out really nicely. And actually, I think I got these two mixed up. That one goes there. I really did have them all the right way when I started. Okay, there we go. Now I've got it. You can see I have almost a continuous pattern. Looks like each of these are just mini framed pictures. But it made the teacup look very nice in that it wraps all the way around. So it keeps drawing your eye around it. And for this, I did use my liquid glue. I did need a little bit of wiggle room. So let me just slide these up here. You don't need a lot of liquid glue, so don't get too heavy-handed with it. And you do want to run it up almost to the very top. And I know it looks like that leaves a lot of excess cardstock showing here, but remember, this is going to curve under, so we're not so concerned about that. The main thing is to make sure you line the tops up. All right, it's coming together nicely. Hope everybody's having a good Saturday. It looks like it's going to rain out here again, but we did manage to get the grass cut yesterday, so that was a good thing. And Amy, I know you said your husband's been working on the deck. We've had some work done on ours too, and they just don't seem to be able to get the last little bit of sealant down because it's rained so much. All right, we're almost done with this. Just a couple more pieces. And you can see why I use that liquid glue, because I'm actually sliding it to make sure that it goes on there correctly. And not only am I lining up the tops, but I'm also trying to be sure I have an equal amount of border on all the sides. All right, so I can put that up for the moment. And now I'm going to start sticking things down. So the first thing I want to do is peel off the tear and tape from here. Now I have a little trick for you, because remember, we have to put that flap in when I fold this over. So I'm going to fold over the last 5 sections and press them down, but I'm not going to press down all the way to the edge here. I've got my finger underneath that because I need to make sure I can stick my flap in. Oh, and I just did that wrong. It's this end I need to leave open. Okay, opposite ends. So I haven't stuck down that end. Now, whoops, I need to take off my backing here. Yeah, I know what you mean about extended time frames on getting that stuff done. They've been working on our deck for, a month. Okay, so I'm sliding my flap in. I'm not pressing down yet because I want to make sure that I get my edges lined up nice and neat. And then once I do, I can go ahead and press down to make sure that my tear and tape has made a good seal. And you can see that makes it a nice shape. All right, so how do we do this to get it to curve under? Make sure I know where my back is. So this is my back right here, which means, so I'm going to put my handle probably right there. So these two sections are my front. Okay, so I want to make sure that one of these two gets glued down last. And all you do is take your opposing flaps and you're going to glue them together. But instead of just making them meet and gluing them down, we're actually going to pull them in a little bit to get that curve. And let me show you how you do that. I'm going to put some liquid glue here. And then you see where it angles in right here on this flap? What we want to do, I'm spreading the rest of the flaps out. What we want to do is make these two meet up so that the top of this flap meets at that junction. If I can get it down there, right? There we go. So I've got the top of this flap where at the widest point of the bottom flap. And then I'm just going to hold them together for a minute to get a good seal. And I don't know if you can see it, but that's what gives it that curved look. All right, so making sure we remember where our back is, because I'm going to put one of these two down last, and I think I'm going to put this one down last. So now I'll do it with these two pieces. Same thing. A little bit of liquid glue here. It becomes a little bit easier now that I have a flap stuck down already for it to stick to. And I'm going to go all the way up to that narrowest part and just glue it down. I can get my finger in there. And don't worry if you get a little wonky down here, because we're actually going to cover the bottom up. But we've got that, and now I just have one more to do right here. So I'll lay that down and then slide this as close to where that slant starts as I can and hold it down. And now I think you can see how we've got that little rounded bottom. All right. But I did want to do something with the bottom because it just looked unfinished to me. So let me show you what I did. I mentioned the pearlized doily. Yep, we're going to use that. But in the dies for Time for Tea, you have these two circular scalloped ones. For the smaller teacup, I use the small one. For this one, I'm going to use the larger one. And I just cut it out of the rich raspberry. And all I'm going to do is put my liquid glue here. And then line this up as best I can. And as you can see, that'll give it a nice finished bottom. I also did want to use a doily on it, but I thought that instead of just putting the doily below, because this is a larger teacup, I wanted a bigger base. So I took our layering circles and I cut out, I think this is the second to the largest one. And what I'm going to do is glue my doily onto this, and then I'm going to use dimensionals to pop that up. And that way it looks like we have a nice size saucer underneath our teacup. And you can use glue dots to glue this down. I just took a little bit of glue wherever I saw that I had room. You're not going to put it on the very outer edges. That way it can kind of fluff up a little bit like a real doily would, because those aren't glued to our saucers. And I'll just line that up and press it down. And I take it back. We're not going to use dimensionals on that. We're just going to straight glue it down. So for that, I'm just going to put some liquid glue on the very bottom. And again, I want to try and line it up. So I put it on there and then I turned it over so I could squiggle it around. And it wasn't that difficult to do. Okay, so we are almost done, but we're missing a handle and we need a sentiment. For the handle, let me see where my goodie bag is here. What I did was I took 2 of our layering ovals and nested them one inside the other. And the ones I chose were just one that was long enough to fit along the side of the cup and look well, and then not the very next smaller one, but the one after that, to get the width that I wanted. You certainly don't have to have a wide handle like that, but because we're actually going to fold this in half, I thought that the extra width would just make it look sturdier. And to fold it in half, I did bring in my scoreboard, and I'm just going to line it up here to where I see where my center is, and then take my stylus. And because this is about 2 inches from here to here, I know that my 5-inch mark is about halfway. I'm not going to score at that 5-inch mark. Instead, I'm going to come 1 tick mark over and score all the way down. And then, and you'll notice I'm holding it very firmly. I don't want it to shift. 1 tick mark on the other side of the 5. All the way down. And what that will do is give me 2 areas that'll make it easy for me to fold on. So I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, there you can, I think. And then I'm just going to take and fold along those 2 score lines. Because our cardstock is such a nice weight, I found that scoring it kept me from having any crimps that I didn't want. And that's going to become our handle. I do want to glue down the center part. And then I'm also going to apply glue on these 2 now flat areas. And that's how we will go ahead and attach it. And I found it easier. You can glue it either way. You can glue these ends down to it first, attach it to the teacup that way, and then glue that. But I found it easier to actually hang on to the handle while I was trying to position it. So I just put a little bit of glue right there, and I glued down the center first. And it just made it easier for me to handle. All right, so let's find our back, which is, where's our back? Oh, right there. And so I'm going to attach it just like that. You could certainly also use glue dots for this, or a little bit of tear and tape. Whatever your preference is. All right, and then I'm just going to try and find about the center. And it might help if I laid it down this way. put my fingernail in there to hold it down. Obviously, if you were using glue dots, you wouldn't have to worry about that, or tear and tape, but because I use liquid glue, I want to make sure I'm holding a little bit of pressure on it so that it doesn't move around. Okay, and there's our handle. Last thing I want to do is it needs a sentiment. Again, using the Time for Tea stamp set, I use the sentiment from Me to You. It also has a nice little floral flourish, or leafy flourish, that I stamped in mint macaron, and then I used the rich raspberry for the sentiment. And I punched it out using the appropriate size circle punch. I think it was 1.5 inches, I want to say. And then I used the smaller of the doily-like dies from the Time for Tea bundle, and I just glued the sentiment onto that. I punched a hole with my hole punch, and to attach it, I finally broke down and got the polka dot ribbon, polka dot tulle ribbon. So we're going to use this to attach our sentiment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it through my handle first. And then if I can bunch this up, put it through the hole that I punched, and then I can bring this up, and you can tie it. And you can tie it however tight you want. If I want it right up against the top of the handle, I can pull it tight. If I want it to hang down a bit, I'm obviously not going to tie it as tight. And because this isn't something they need to open, I didn't feel the need to tie a bow, though you certainly could. I'm just going to go ahead and tie it in a knot there. And I would probably use, I'm going to use a little tear and tape, but I would probably use a glue dot for my ribbon there. Otherwise, it's going to fall like that. So I'm going to use a little piece of tear and tape, or you could use a glue dot just to attach it at the top there. Now let me bring that in and just cut off a little piece. I can get it to not stick to me. And I'll just take and put it right there. You certainly could put other embellishments on it, depending on what DSP you use, what cardstock you use. The possibilities are endless. Oh, and I just pulled that away. But there we go. So there is our cute little teacup using the Time for Tea stamp set and the dies, the coordinating dies, and the Tea Time DSP. All right, any questions about how that was made? Oh, I'm going to have to, I see I'm going to have to use a little piece of tear and tape. Sometimes if you don't get good contact on your handle with the liquid glue, you might just want to go ahead and use a little tear and tape. Although, like I said, glue dots would certainly work very well. But let me just reattach this real quick. And that was also why it was important for me to do those score lines in the handle, so I'd have a flat enough base for it to adhere to the side of our cup. Now let's see if I can get this off. Okay, where did my pokey tool go? The small one probably took me maybe 20 minutes to make from very start to finish. And I mean, by very start, I mean cutting out the cardstock, the DSP panels, and the handle. Probably only took me about 20 minutes. This did not take me much longer. Maybe it took me 25, 30 minutes tops. If you were needing to do multiples, say for instance, when the kids go back to school, you want to have a little something for the teacher. This would work really well because you can cut out all the pieces ahead of time and do it in stages while you're sitting in front of the telly, watching your favorite show. You can fill it up with chocolates or just any number of goodies. I saw someone put an emergency nail kit in one of them with nail files, little clippers. So possibilities are endless for what you can actually put in it. Okay. Now find my, tell you, this thing goes together so well, it can be hard to find that flap. So I'm just going to stick that down. And this time I know it's going to hold. Okay, that's much better. Don't want our handle falling off. But as you can see, because I numbered my strips of DSP, since I cut them all out from one strip, and it was a pattern, it really makes a nice little, almost like a diorama going all the way around it. I know, Amy, I really love that polka dot ribbon too. I can't believe I didn't get it before now. All right, well, I will let y'all get back to your Saturday. Hope the rest of your weekend is pleasant and that you have good weather. And I will talk to you again on Tuesday night. If you do have a project in mind that you would like for me to demonstrate, please leave me a comment and I'll be more than happy to make some of our projects from your suggestions. All right, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.